So that's really all there is with macros. And now what I want to do is start creating some macros to show you some real interesting ways of doing this. So this one here is called the format sheet. Let me see which one this is. All right, yeah, this is using your shift arrow. I assigned it a Ctrl M for, I guess I could have used the F, but on this to format it, but I think I used F for something else. So let's take a look at how we would format a sheet. So this is telling me to open up a file called format QTR. So we're going to go to File, Open, Format QTR. And it should be right towards the top up here, I thought. Oh, it's down here in the middle. Format quarter. Okay, so something unique about this particular sheet is I want to just, this is something that I might open up on a regular basis. And every time I open it or get a new data dump or something, I've got to go through and format it. So I'm going to write a macro to format this sheet. The problem that I have is that quarter 1 and quarter 2 has 7 lines. 7 lines here. But quarter 3 has more lines. So another person was added in here. Quarter 4 actually has 9 lines. So it's changing in size. But we're going to show you some interesting techniques to actually do this. And let me show you the technique now. If I were to click on the sales rep here and hold my shift key down, I can actually select it using the shift arrow. So I'm doing the shift arrows like this. If you hold the control key down and push your down arrow, it jumps to the bottom. See? If you do a shift and a control key and a down arrow, it selects it all the way to the bottom. So I'm not physically selecting it 6 cells like that. I'm not physically doing that. I'm just saying select it all the way to the bottom. I don't know where the bottom is. So if I go over to quarter 4 and I simply click here and I say shift control down arrow, it selects everything to the bottom. So that's an interesting little trick that will allow you to work with a variable size database. But we're going to record it as an absolute macro, okay? Very clean, very slick. And there's a lot of little tips like this I want to show you. This is one of them. Okay, we're going to write an absolute macro. We're going to start in the bottom down here, and our first click is going to be here, and then we're going to select that, and then we're going to format it. We're going to click here, and then we're going to select this with the right arrow. We're going to format that. We're going to click here, and we're going to select all this and maybe format that, and then maybe we'll format the whole thing or something like that too, okay? So we're going to start here, go to your developer tab, and here's our relative. We want to make sure it's in the absolute mode. We'll record this as an absolute macro. Record the macro. We're going to call this format me. Now, if you make a mistake, let's put a 1 out there so that if we make a mistake, we can just write a number 2 and a 3 until we get it done. If you want to put a keyboard command, you can do that. I think we already used the F keyboard command. I'm not sure if we did or not. I believe we did. But I'll put the F in there to see if that works. If it's in conflict, it may come back and tell me that. Now, you might want this in the personal macro workbook because this could be a different file every day. You may be opening up a new file, a new data dump in a new file every day, and then you want to apply that to that file. Okay, so there's our initial layout. Are we ready to go? Say OK. Use your mouse and click in A2, and then do a Control Shift down arrow to highlight that. Then we're going to go to Home, click on the little paint bucket, and give it kind of a shade. we're going to use our mouse and click on A2, Control Shift right arrow, which highlights those labels. And we're going to give that a shade. Then we're going to click in B3, Control Shift down arrow, and then right arrow. Now I don't want the percentages part of this, so I'm going to hold the Shift key down and put the back arrow to go back one. So a Control Shift right arrow and then a Shift back arrow. That's what I want highlighted. So I'm going to format that to be by currency. And then we can click on I3, Control Shift down arrow, and we're going to put that as a percentage. Click on A2, Control Shift down arrow, Control Shift right arrow, and we're going to put all borders out there. We're going to apply all borders to the entire sheet. So we can do that. We can click on A1, make it bold, a little bigger maybe, something like that. And I also want to change my alignment here. So if I select B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and grab one of the lines in between one of the letters and move it to the right, see how you can evenly space it out? So I want to make sure it's nice and spread out and evenly spaced out. Click here when I'm done. And if that's good enough for you, if that's all you want to do, you stop recording, right? Developer, stop recording. Go over to Q2 and run that macro, and it should format it. Control Shift F and format it. Now here's the tricky part. The database grew a little bit. Control Shift F and it did it. See it? Go to Q4, Control Shift F, and it worked. So a little bit of tricks in terms of getting it to format things. If you've got a database and you want to select the entire database, well, there's several ways to do that. See, the reason why I did it that way was if I were to click in here and did a Control A, see, that selected everything, including this up here. See it? I didn't want this selected. So that's why I said a Control A would select the region, but this is part of the region. That's why I had to use the Control Shift down arrow to get it this way, because I didn't want that to be selected as part of this. So you could use your regional select by just doing a Control A and it selects the entire region. And that would work too in some cases. But if you have a little issue like this, then you might want to go through and do it that way. All right, sound good? So again, I can take these, select them, clear out the format, say clear format this way, and run it again to see if it's going to work. And if it doesn't work, figure out where you made your mistake, and then go back and re-record it, trying to fix that little mistake. Now let's go back and look at the code on these to see how this actually works. So I'm going to clear that out. Let's go back, look at the code on this. And I'm coming down to my module here. Looks like I made a new module for it for some reason. And here's my format macro. Format me, you have to kind of find it, locate it. Look at all the code it put in there. I mean, I wouldn't want to type all this in, would you? So that's why sometimes creating a macro to build your Visual Basic code is easier than trying to type in the code yourself, because you're going to make all kinds of syntax issues. But if you can do half the program using a macro, then you'd be better off. You see, you can do it much quicker, see, and save you some time. And we'll go through these commands to show you how this is set up in a little while. There's the range command and a few other range structures here. There's the command there that actually did the Control Shift down. See, it says go to the end, XL down to the end. So that's the command that did the Control Shift down arrow. And so that's how that works. Did anybody not be able to get that to work, or you've got it to work okay?
My only thing is that for quarter 3 and quarter 4, it didn't grab the last one.
And that's because when you recorded it, you probably used your mouse and did it this way.
Got it, okay.
See, if you did the Control Shift down arrow like this, then that would actually go to the bottom.
Got it.
But because you actually did a physical selection like this with your mouse, then when you applied it over here, it did a physical connection with your mouse like there. See it?
Got it, okay.
And that's that little trick, that little Control Shift down arrow trick that is pretty useful.
Got it, okay.
Good. All right, so that is one little trick we could use. So I kind of written all of these in here. Here's my format macro. Here's my format macro. I went through and gave an example, and here's my little example printout of quarter 4. It formats it. Here's a print setup macro. So say, for example, you print to a color printer, but every time you print to the color printer, it comes out black and white. And so every time you go there, you have to actually go to the settings and make changes to the settings in order to print. So then you print to other printers, but every time you go back to that printer, it sort of doesn't seem to save the settings for you. And so you have to go in and make a change every time. So why not write a macro to do that setup for you? So every time you go to that printer, you would simply run the macro, and it would set it up for you automatically. Okay? That's the idea of a macro there. Here's another macro idea. Let's open up a file. In the file, we call this file pivot. And we're going to open up and we're going to go through and do some sorting. I just show you that some of these macros can be very simple to record, but they actually can be pretty powerful in terms of time savings. All right, so let's go over to Excel and open up this file called pivot. Close off my Visual Basic Editor. Open, browse. And the file name is called pivot. All right, and all it is just a database of information. And what we want to do is we're going to sort this database. And then we're going to go through and we'll go through some practicing first to show you how you would sort it. And then I'm going to show you some of the tips and some macro creation tips. And the other macro creation tip was the Control Shift down arrow, which would select the area down the bottom. That's an interesting tip. And this one here, all you have to do to sort this database is you simply go to your Data tab, make sure you're in the database somewhere, and you simply say Sort, and then we're going to sort it by a couple of fields. Okay, and then we'll say OK, and then we're going to stop that macro. So we're going to create a bunch of sorts. We're going to sort it. One, we're going to sort it by product, and then maybe we'll sort it by region or something like that. Okay, so by product and region. Now here's the trick I'm talking about. If I were to click in the middle of the database in here, okay, and I were to come up and said sort, it opens up the sort, right? But what if the end user and their mouse was out here? And then you ran the macro went up and ran sort, and it came back with errors because it couldn't find the data area. Okay. So the trick is that when you click somewhere in here, you always want to make your first click is going to be in the database somewhere. So we're going to start here and we're going to click here and it will record cell E5 as the first line in the macro. And that way, if you happen to be out here and then the first command in the macro is going to do what? It's going to go here first. Okay, so that would resolve a few little issues. Okay, so we'll start here and we're going to simply go ahead and record a macro. Now, should this macro be a relative or absolute macro?
It would be absolute.
Yeah, because this field is not changing at all, right? So it's kind of starting up here. We're not really selecting the whole thing down here. So I think an absolute would work fine for this. Okay, so we're going to start in our F5. So I'll click here and I'll simply go to Developer tab, record a macro, and it says, okay, I'm going to call this sort product, and I'll put a 1 out there in case I've already done that before. We don't need a keyboard tonight. We're going to put a button in here. Now, since this is part of this database, we might want to put it in this workbook so that if somebody else opens up this file, they'll be able to run this macro. So that's what I'm doing. Sort by product. Say OK. Then the first click is going to be what? Click. And that means it's going to record that in the first command of the macro. And then we go to data sort. And we're going to choose product. And we're going to sort it by date. Then you say OK. And that's it. Stop the macro. Okay, we're going to do the same thing again, but this time we're going to sort it by region. So you're going to click on region here. Make sure it's in absolute mode. Record a macro. We're going to call it sort region. I'll put a 1 on there in case I have to re-record it. No keyboard command. It's going to be in this workbook. And we say OK. So our first click is going to be there. And then we're going to go to data, sort. We're going to sort it by region and then by date. Then say OK. And we're going to stop our macro. Developer, stop recording. Now I'm going to put a little button in the corner up here, right in this field up here, in order to run the macro. So I'll insert a shape, a rectangle shape, and I'll draw a little rectangle box right next to the word product. Now oftentimes what I do is I would make a copy of that rectangle shape so I could use the exact same size shape rather than trying to draw it again and trying to get the exact size. So I'll simply copy that shape like this with a Control C, Control V, and I'll sort of make a copy of it this way. Back. Maybe I'll make this a little bit wider so we can see it better. Okay, there we go. There's my little buttons. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply assign the macro to it. You right-click, assign macro. The product macro is going to be assigned to that one. And the sort region macro will be assigned to that one. So not too difficult of a command. Now if I want to run the macro, what you do, you just click on the icon, right? It sorts it. Now, it doesn't really take that long to sort it manually, but I've actually reduced a couple of clicks, haven't I? So if this is a database that you're constantly resorting in different ways, then this might be very useful, right? Did you get that to work?
Yes.
Good. Interesting, isn't it?
Very helpful.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an interesting little twist to it. And so the question is, what do you really need to record? What do you do that might save you some time? And these are very, very simple macros. The reset macro is a very simple macro. It's not very complicated. It just did a basic thing. See it? And yet it saved yourself a little bit of time. And that's what you can do with these macros, is look for things that might be sort of a productivity tip for you, something you kind of find yourself doing kind of routinely, and then write a little macro to do that. This is pretty slick, I think, in terms of sorting this way. So you create a button for each one of these fields and just make it, you can make the button actually really small if you wanted to. I can size the button down a little bit and make it kind of a real tiny button like this, just something really tiny that you just click on. See? So, and that's one way you can do it. You okay with macros? Not too bad?
No, not too bad.
Let's go look at the code on this. Developer, Visual Basic, and we're going to look at the pivot file. Now we put this in, looks like we do have a pivot in here, see? So there's my macro. So it's pretty complicated, a lot of code in here, but you can see the first command is the E5, because we did that click first, remember? And that's important because if I was outside of the data area, it would actually go through and go there first. So for example, if I was out here, when I started my macro then is going to go to E5 first and then do the sort. See, so it doesn't matter where my mouse is, it will still sort it. It'll go to that place first. That's why I wanted to do that little. So that's the idea of your macros. All right, looks like I did a couple here. There's a region 1, there's my sort region 1, there's my sort product.
So in your opinion, would it be better if we made a mistake in the macro, would it be better to edit it via Visual Basic or just start over with the actual macro?
Well, you could either way. I mean, I think if you have more experience, you'll probably go into the Visual Basic code and make the change.
Yeah.
But if you don't have a clue, then you probably won't. You'll probably just re-record it. You know, and a lot of times what I would do if I come in here and say, for example, let's make a copy of this region 1 here. Make a copy of this whole code like this.
Yeah.
And so I've got 2 region 1s in here. There's region 1, there's region 1, there's region 1 there. So I might call this one sort by cells or something like that.
Yeah.
So the question is, would it be faster to just re-record the macro, or to go through and figure out what code I need to change? See?
Yeah. I guess this depends on your experience.
But it also depends on time too.
Yeah.
I mean, the question is, if you can do it right the first time, then okay. But if you're going to make a mistake, see, then that could slow you down a little bit, where you could have recorded the macro a little quicker. Okay, so that's really all it is. And so I could look through this and figure out what I could change.
Got it.
So probably up here, cells here. That's the cell sheet is what that is. Sort field's clear. You can walk through it and see if you can figure it out, you know, what changes you want to make. So I'm trying to see where does it identify the field? Somewhere, probably these fields here, see? See, here's the range field it's doing it. I mean, you might be able to figure it out and make the change here, but otherwise, you just got to figure out what would be the quickest way to go about doing it. And that's why sometimes just creating macros is a little bit faster than actually writing the code, you know, to make all this happen.